Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham, and with my wife, Nathalie Blackham, from our studios in Jerusalem, with a program that brings you news, interviews from the land of Israel. And in the news today, we've been talking about we'll be talking about the end of the rocket barrages which have been coming against Israel. There was a rocket barrage on southern Israel on Friday morning. That was last week. One person was injured as a building was hit less than 2 hours before an alleged ceasefire took place. The IDF Home Front Command instructed residents of communities located up to 7 kilometres from the Gaza Strip border to stay in their homes and close to a bomb shelter until further notice. At 12:30 a.m. very early Friday morning, and an hour and a half before the so-called ceasefire began, terrorists fired a barrage of rockets at communities located near the Gaza border. One rocket directly hit a building in the Eshkol Regional Council, injuring a 53-year-old man who was rushed by Magen David Adom, Israel's emergency service, by ambulance to hospital. Shortly after 1:30, an additional barrage was fired towards communities located along the Gaza border. No physical injuries have yet been reported from this barrage. Despite the ceasefire, the Home Front Command issued updated guidelines instructing residents of communities located up to 7 kilometers from Gaza to stay in their homes and in close proximity to a bomb shelter until further notice. As you know, we've been in Israel having to use the bomb shelters because of the possibility of rocket fire. All movement and activity was last week prohibited. The Islamic terrorist organization Hamas stated that the ceasefire with Israel had been approved and would begin at 2 a.m. Friday morning. For Hamas, it should be understood, and we need to understand this, that the ceasefire is a hudna. Well, what is a hudna? The Islamic term hudna, or hudna, derived from hadana, is an agreement to stop a fight or a war for a limited period of time. A hudna is not permanent and does not imply a potential for stable peace in the far or near future. It is equivalent to the status quo with no solution to the conflict envisaged. The hudna allows Hamas to rearm and to re-strengthen. And basically, Israel has been fighting terrorists. Hamas is recognized as a terrorist organization in the United States and Europe. And
by the way, in Hebrew, Hamas means violence.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting because it really shows how they are. And I heard a lot in Europe, they're saying, Israel is doing so bad, like they are killing Palestinians in Gaza. But when it's like, no, they are protecting the civilians because Hamas is sending some rockets. And when you see these people, if you go over there on the ground, you can see how violent they are. And like they're really terrible. And it's not, they don't want peace. They want to destroy Israel. And you have to protect. You have to protect your civilians. You have to protect your country.
Right.
Which every country will do that anyhow.
Right. And the terrorists have been firing rockets at Israel non-stop, really, for many years. And it was only because they started firing them towards Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and in great numbers that Israel had to do something. But these rockets from the terrorists, Hamas is a terrorist organization that controls the Gaza Strip, have been fired into Israel for years and years and years. And so it's normal that a country that is being attacked is protecting itself. So on Friday, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced Gaza rocket fire will be met with a whole new level of force. The Prime Minister said rules have changed, Israel to take a much tougher stance against Hamas. He said Israel had achieved its military objectives in Gaza with extraordinary success. He vowed that the current round of fighting with Hamas, which appeared to end with an early morning ceasefire on Friday, would see a much tougher stance, and that any future rocket fire would be met with a whole new level of force. The thing is about the rocket fire is that it causes disruption throughout the country. People who live in the south of Israel have to live in bomb shelters. They have to have their dinner, have their meals. have their bed in there to survive. It's not possible to live in your house. You have to be, because you don't have any time to run to the bomb shelter. The time you can run to a bomb shelter is less and less and less. And basically,
And when you're close, when you're very close to Gaza, you don't have as much time. Like we live close to Jerusalem, so we have a longer time for running into our bomb shelter than them. So you can imagine, I mean, I remember like on the Friday when we heard that there was a ceasefire, it was like, okay, good. Even us who are not under, but we are part of the country, you can feel the stress going higher and higher in you. And to know that, okay, the ceasefire was going hopefully to stand and is standing right now. I tell you, it's like our Shabbat was very different than how it was.
As I said at the beginning, the ceasefire is not a ceasefire like we imagine in the West. You have to look at it from an Islamic perspective, and it basically is just that they stop firing their weapons. They haven't put their weapons down.
And
nobody has
said,
surrendered.
I know, and they say also that they have a lot of long range missiles too.
And nobody said that they're stopping firing missiles or weapons or trying to destroy Israel. Basically, Hamas's charter is the total destruction of the nation of Israel, the killing of all the people here, and the removal of this nation. That's it. That's their purpose. That's their goal. So how on earth you can live with a country? It's like having the island want to destroy a whole of Britain and remove all the people. It's very, very difficult to live next to a country like that. And these are the people who are on the border in the south, and in the north we have the Lebanese, the terrorists, the Hezbollah terrorist organization sponsored by Iran, as is Gaza, and they want the total destruction of Israel, and that's it. And so all this nonsense on the main media about a war in which there's two sides is a lot of absolute nonsense, because it isn't a war of two sides. It's terrorists trying to fight a democratic country. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we've changed the equation, not only as regards to the operation, but also as regards to the future. If Hamas thinks we will tolerate a drizzle of rockets, it is mistaken, the Prime Minister said, referring to the sporadic fire often seen from Gaza between major rounds of attack. Now, which is what I've just mentioned, they're firing rockets even when there's a ceasefire. So-called ceasefire.
Yeah, we had that few times.
Now, the Prime Minister said that the success of the entire operation that's just been undertaken, the Israeli Air Force were very involved in having to bomb the Gaza Strip, bomb the terrorists, to stop them firing their weapons, to destroy their armory, to destroy their weapons. He said it's been very successful, and Israel has managed to stop drones and most rocket attacks. And it's also the Iron Dome system has been extensively used. And he said that it will mean that the terrorist group...
Very, very expensive, by the way. Every rocket, which is from the Iron Dome to intercept one of the missiles, is about $50,000 or $60,000 one. And we had more than 4,000 missiles and rockets thrown into fired into the land in 11 days.
Now, he said that they would be more careful, the terrorist group, before attacking Israel in the future. Now, one of the things that Israel has had to do is the massive clearing up, which hasn't been featured in any of the world media at all. But Israel has had to deal with the effects of the war. For many people, everything has changed since the Hamas terrorists fired over 4,000 rockets at Israel, killing over 13 people. Multiple buildings were hit and damaged, houses, leaving dozens of families homeless, with their possessions destroyed, cars destroyed, houses destroyed, buildings destroyed, roads damaged. Stories emerged of severely traumatized individuals and families. Last Monday, the Jewish festival of Shabbat, that was not this Monday, but 2 weeks ago, in other words, a rocket slammed into a residential building in the coastal city of Ashdod, severely damaging it. Malka and Michael Stillerman had no protected area in their home, and the public bomb shelter was far too was too far away to reach in time. Michael was in a wheelchair. He was in the house at the time when it was hit. Every time there is a siren, the two of them just sit by the door and wait. The rocket that hit them on Monday was totally destroyed their house. Wow. So this is the result of terrorists, that their house has been destroyed. Michael was lightly wounded and remains in hospital. So the house is destroyed. The husband is in hospital. How can we start again? I don't know, Malchus said to Israeli news media. I can't tell you. It's so hard. I do not cry because I need to live. I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I need to live so that to see that her children are okay. Her neighbour, Clara Sackler, came to help to try to salvage some of the family's belonging. It's an explosion inside your heart when you've worked so hard for so many years and suddenly, all in 1 second, it's all gone. All their work, working in the country, saving money, putting money into their home, is all gone. Sackler said Rivka Gorenstein tried to gather as much as she could to salvage from the ruins of her house. What happened here is a catastrophe. It will take a long time to fix. Meanwhile, Esther Ruthkat said there is almost a sense of relief after the rocket hit. After so many days of tension, as Natalie was saying, it's not just the rockets firing, there's tension all the time. That you're wondering, is there a rocket going to come? Am I close enough to a bomb shelter? Will I get to the bomb shelter in time? Will the rocket hit the bomb shelter? After the explosion and the impact, you almost relax. It has now happened and that's it. There is no more anxiety. We've been through it and it's done, she said. However, Katia Ogbonna, whose Nigerian soccer player husband, Ibezetu, was lightly hurt by shrapnel in the explosion, told Israeli news media that the nightmare continues even after the attack. Listen, you don't just have the rocket hit your home and damage it, but you've got to live with the consequences. We count the explosions from the rockets and interceptions, and it's more than 10 every time. When does it end? It doesn't end. She recounted the initial moments that are from the impact. I lay down on top of my two small children to protect them, and suddenly there was exploding glass everywhere. My husband was thrown into the air, Ogbonna said. The whole house is now broken glass. We can't go back there. So, this whole conflict that was caused by the terrorists firing rockets into Israel. Israel has not been firing rockets into Gaza. Gaza's been firing rockets into Israel. It's been happening for years. The terrorists have been doing this. And Israel had to sort it out. And then the main media seems to imply that Israel is fighting a war against another country. It's not a war against another country. It's a war against terrorism. For example, if you're living in England and you were there in London when there was the explosions on the London Underground, England wasn't fighting a war against another country. England was fighting a war against terrorists. And that's exactly what Israel is doing today. Now, Natalie,
but even when you say all of that, I want also to pick up on that, because when you see Hamas, they are sending firing rockets onto civilians, and we don't know when it's going to happen. So you can be, sometimes it seems to be early in the morning and sometimes kind of 6 o'clock, but it can be any time. Which means that you want to go to take your shower. Oh, can I take my shower now? It's like all these things is like in your daily life, and you hear a noise. Is it a siren? You have all these things, okay? But now when you look at the IDF, they go, first of all, to target terrorists who have been fighting. So they are not doing it. It's like a defense. Like it's called IDF, is Israel Defense Force, okay? They are not going there to conquer. They are there to defend their country. So this is the first things. Then after they go for the terrorists, they say to the people before they are going to target, they say if there is people around, go out. So they send leaflets, they send emails or WhatsApp, whatever, things like that. They are telling the people. Then they send a boom, which is like a little missile. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's like to tell them, hey, we are coming. This is not the destruction, but this is to tell you we are coming. And then, only then, they are sending very targeted missile and usually is always to kill terrorists. So you can see the steps that they are doing compared to Hamas, who wants to kill whoever and just throw whenever they want to. So it's a very different way of thinking, and the media just don't speak about these things most of the time.
And you've got some things to share with us today, Nathalie.
So yes, we like us to give you some positive things, because there is so many things. It's hard, when we read and we're learning what's happening, and we are also looking at what's happening in the news, and we've been looking also at the wicked, which is not always the one that you think are. But what I wanted to show you today, and how we were speaking, how important it is to read some Psalms. And this is like from the Tehillim, which is the book, which means Psalms in Hebrew. Funny enough, this week I heard a friend of mine, she's Jewish, and she was saying to all her friends, oh, please read the Psalms and try to read them also in Hebrew, because it's so powerful. I was like, yes, you're right. We're on the same line, and it's very important. But anyway, if you can't read it in Hebrew, you can read it in English. If you want to learn a bit of Hebrew, I think it's very important. And sometimes you can even read like the interlinear, and there is some Hebrew written in English, so you can just read it this way. But it's very powerful, because the Hebrew language is like a language who goes into different realms, I would say, and is going from heaven to earth, and his target, is our missiles in one way, our prayers, and especially the Psalms. Now, when I was reading the Psalm, and because we know that we are really coming at the end of the days, the last days, suddenly, when I read the Jewish commentary, it's a lot of Psalms, Martin, who are about the Messianic time. And I'm amazed. I never really realized that. So I was reading the Psalm 92, and I'm going to tell you, which is very interesting, because he said a song with musical accompaniments for the Shabbat day. And I've learned about it before, but this time, for me, it was like even more important. I want to show you like Shabbat, okay? Shabbat is a very, very important name. When you look at the it's like Shrina, is like the presence of God. When after you look at the Bet, is like a house. So you bring the Shrina into your home. And then the Shabbat, the Te, which is Tav, which also represent Emet, the truth. So it means that you bring the Shrina into your home, and you are proclaiming that truth will prevail. This is Shabbat. This is amazing. Now, what I discovered also a few weeks ago, like we had more time to think and to pray. And I don't know, I think God is giving more revelation also right now, because we're coming really at the end of the time. So there is big bangs, there is birth pangs, is terrible in one way, but we have to look further, that the baby is going to be born. The baby means redemption. It means the millennium. It means the time where Shabbat will be all the time. If you noticed in Exodus 20, I was trying to find the exact place today. It said that God created the heaven and the earth in 6 days. So the world was created in 6 days. So what happened about the seventh day, which is a Shabbat? Is in one way it wasn't created like God created the heaven and the earth. But like when he rested, he came and his holiness came, which is exactly, okay, let us read Exodus 20, because it might be like a new way of thinking, but suddenly I was like, wow, God created 6 days, but the seventh day is a totally different day. And I will tell you a bit more after. So Exodus 20:11 is written, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. By the way, it's written Shevi'i Beyom, which is interesting because it's like the 7 in the day. And he blessed the Shabbat day and he sanctified it, which is better in Hebrew, is like he make it holy. So it's like there is some kadosh, there is some holiness that is there. I mean, when you think about all of that, when you make it sink in you, you can discover that Shabbat is a unique day. And now, interesting enough, in Hebrew, they are still saying, like in Israel, you have day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and Shabbat. Okay? Like us, we say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but then it's still day 1, day 2, day 3, like in Genesis. And they are always related to Shabbat. So it's the day 1 before Shabbat or the day 1 after Shabbat. But you understand, it's related with Shabbat. And Shabbat is the center of the world. It's like, I tell you, it's so exciting, Mark. So when I was reading this book, like the Psalm 92, and they speak about the Shabbat, Shabbat is also because God is resting of all the things that is done, is also prophetically speaking about the millennium. And they have a beautiful name. Let me try to find it, because I didn't remember that before, and I really liked it. They say this is the day which is completely Shabbat. So it's Yom Shekulo Shabbat. For ordinary weekdays will not exist in that totally sacred world. So when we will arrive into the millennium, we won't have all the days of the week. It will be Shabbat all the time. So they will have this holiness. So let us carry on these thoughts, because, you know, we always, very often as Christians, we say, oh, I can't wait that I will be in heaven, no more fights over there, everything will be wonderful, and all of that. So very often we are taught that we are here on earth, it's hard, when we'll be in heaven it will be okay. But this is not what God is asking us. God is asking us, saying, and is in the prayer that Jesus gave, that your kingdom will come on earth as it is in heaven. So God wants to come here and bring holiness in this world. So when he came for Shabbat, for the first Shabbat, is what he was saying. He said, I want to come in this lower place because I want to bring my holiness. And so right now is the fight between darkness and light, and we can see that all around the world with all the things that are happening, because this is the fight to bring the lightness and to bring God's holiness and his light and Mashiach, the Messiah who is going to come, and we won't be anymore. They will have no more wickedness, okay? They will be, this is also something very interesting to know, because Shabbat also comes from the verb lehashvit, okay? Which is to finish, but it's also to destroy. So God is going to destroy all wickedness. And so he said, like, the righteous will inherit the earth. And also he said in Matthew, Jesus said, the meek will inherit the earth, which is like exactly what was said. I can't remember exactly where it is, but in the Tenach, it also said the righteous will inherit the earth, which means they will have no more place for the wicked. So we are in this very frightening place, I would say, because sometimes it's frightening, but we need to know that God knows and is totally in control, and he will come and he will establish his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. His holiness will come here because he loves us so much and he wants us to be with him all the time. His desire is for us to be. And like when you see the darkness and Satan, he hates us. He's so jealous of us because he can see the love that God has for us. And he's jealous of that. He's just jealous. So he's fighting. But we know, as we say Shabbat at the end, is the Tav Emet. Truth will prevail.
And, it's interesting because in Matthew 24, and we've been talking about this, talking about the end of the age and getting ready for the Messianic kingdom, it says, but what's the end of the age look like? What are the kind of signs? And it says, But as in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the time of the coming of the Son of Man. And we know that in the days of Noah, the earth was corrupt. That's Genesis 6:11 to 13. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, and all flesh had been corrupted. And we were talking, if you watched the program last week, we talked about the book of Enoch. And this is a book I highly recommend to read. It isn't a book of the Bible, but it's a very, very good book to understand the time of Noah, because Jesus said, as in the days of Noah. So there is a little bit of information in Genesis about what the days of Noah were like, but it's much more expounded, and that's what we need. We need to have the book of Genesis expounded so that we understand. And I'm going to read very briefly from the book of Enoch, chapter 15. And just to give you a flavour, because some of you have never read it, or you've heard about it but haven't had a chance to look it up. And chapter 15 says, "And he answered and said to me, and I heard his voice, Fear not, Enoch, thou righteous man and scribe of righteousness. Approach hither and hear my voice, and go to say to the watchers of heaven." And it's all about the watchers, Natalie. This is the big thing, the watchers of heaven, who have sent thee to intercede for them. Unbelievably, the angels had sinned. Remember, the angels fell, and they sent Enoch to heaven, to God, to intercede for them. And God said, "You should not intercede for men, and men for you. It's wherefore you left the high, holy, and eternal heaven, and lain with the women, and defiled yourselves with the daughters of men." Remember, they saw the daughters of men, and they took wives for themselves, and have done like the children of earth, and begotten giants. The giants came, and we've been talking about giants, monsters, dragons, and all these sorts of things, and how these were real things at the time of Noah. And though you were holy and spiritual, these were very holy angels living the eternal life. You defiled yourselves with the blood of women and have begotten children. And listen to this, it's very important. And as the children of men have lusted after flesh and blood, as those who also who die and perish. Therefore I have given them wives, that they may impregnate them and beget children by them, that thus nothing might be wanting to them on earth. But you were formerly spiritual, living the eternal life, and immortal for all generations of the world. And therefore I have not appointed wives for you. But as for the spiritual ones in heaven, heaven is their dwelling. And now the giants who are produced from these fallen angels shall be called evil spirits. Now listen to this, is very interesting. Upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. And evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men and from the holy watchers. And we were talking last week about the origin of evil, that, for many, if you had to ask most Christians, when would you say was the origin of evil, most of them would point you to Genesis, to Adam and Eve. But if you talk to Jewish people, many of them would point you to the time of Noah, the days of Noah. And that's very interesting, Natalie, that these evil spirits proceeded out of the bodies of the giants. And I didn't know that, from their body, because they are born from men, and their holy watchers is the beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on the earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. Now this is very, very important for us in these final hours, that we know what we're up against, because we can share with you the news, we can tell you what's happening in Israel, we can tell you the different stories, but you need to know the background to give you an understanding. And as I said earlier in the program, do try to access the book of Enoch. It'll be very helpful for them, Natalie, and give you a lot of understanding. We've run out of time, otherwise I'd like to tell you a bit more about the book of Noah. Thank you so much, by the way.
But this is interesting, because when you read it also in the book, it said also that the wicked will be destroyed. This is something very important, because sometimes people speak about the rapture, but it's like, it might happen, I don't know, but it's like the righteous will live on earth, and God will come, and it will be a Shabbatic millennium, and the wicked will be destroyed, which is not just the wicked men, but like wickedness, like the evil.
And it talks about that in the New Testament, about the angels going
Yes.
through the threshing ground,
Yes.
and taking the weeds and the tares. There's a separation of the weeds. The angels come and they separate the weeds from the tares. Well, it's been great to have you with us today. We really enjoyed having your company. By the way, thank you so much for all our friends who've been watching on GLC in Texas. We say hi to you. Great to have you with us too, especially our friends Jan and Barbie. Thank you, who've recently contacted us. And if you'd like more information about the program, then please do visit the website, which is www.israelfirst.org. We have a social media site on gab.com where we're doing up-to-date news stories. You can email us at info@israelfirst.org. Remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.